significantly. But we have pods of the are really embracing these tools available, and then we have pods in the industry that are not embracing the tools. So last year, there's an article that came out, and the topic, it was my article, it was if you have a problem fast enough. In our estimation. So let's talk about this from two lenses. One is the industry, and then one is the consumer experience, because again, we think that they go very much hand in hand. So from an industry perspective, regulate the robots. So again, robots are there. I don't think that they're going to go away. Unfortunately, in every industry, in the insurance industry, we know that there's a lot of fraud in the insurance industry, for example. There's fraud in every industry. That's not going to go away. But there are tools that we have, and they've gotten just even over the first time that I saw tools that actually monitored this was probably about 4 to 5 years ago-ish. And literally every quarter now, the amount of development that these companies are doing, and by the way, I have no stake in any of them, so I'm not a cheerleader for them. I'm a cheerleader for them because they work, not because I have any sort of stake in any of them. But they work. They work in filtering out activity. There's pre-bid now, so you can not just find out. Initially, when the tools came out, you theoretically could buy an impression and find out after the fact that it was robotic, and then you had to filter it out. Now you can actually pre-filter it, so you don't have to buy it in the first place. The technology will tell you before you actually bid on an ad, if you're an advertiser, whether or not it's a human being or a robot. And depending on the technology, the nuances are slightly off. In other words, the technologies in and of themselves have percentage points of difference. But again, we're talking about individual percentage points as opposed to wide swaths of percentage points at this point. So you could get pretty accurate, even between technologies, of what is a robot versus what is a human. Therefore, bringing that $7.2 billion number, I would argue, down to very close to nothing, or substantially lower at least. So, but it's on us. It's on us as an industry to embrace these trends. We don't lean into these trends enough. We don't lean into these technologies enough, and we don't data share across publishers and advertisers enough as well, because everybody's very guarded about who goes where. Well, we don't want to share that with them, but you know what? We have to, because again, as an industry, this will make us healthier and stronger. So we can regulate the robots. The question is, are we going to choose to regulate the robots? And the good news is that the big players have chosen to regulate the robots. Viewability. So a friend and colleague, Ari Blumen, who those who don't know, is the Chief Digital Investment Officer in North America. I think it was 2014. He sat on a stage and he said, an impression that is not viewable by a human being is worth 0 to me. 0. And the way he talks, for those who know Ari, very poignant guy. So that triggered a pretty massive discussion around whether or not an ad that was seen by a human being was actually viewable. And this was literally a discussion that was had in the industry for about 6 months post that discussion, because there was a discussion that was had that, well, okay, even if it wasn't viewable, isn't it at least worth a penny, 2 pennies? Isn't it worth something? Is it literally worth 0? Well, we've seen now, this is several years later, that in fact, the concept of a viewable CPM and viewable inventory based on standards. Now there's the MRC standard, the IB standard. Group M has their own standard. But the tools that measure this, again, are getting very close between themselves, which means the buy side can implement and the sell side can implement different tools and still be pretty close between each other. And can actually transact on something that's actually viewable. So, and that's just in the matter of a few years, which isn't, from a trajectory perspective in an industry, is actually not that long. But again, we have to continue to lean into these trends because this is the type of stuff that will make our industry better. Now, for the largest publishers, and I looked at the attendee list, we have some large publishers in this room too. This was actually very challenging, right? Because it takes time to build websites and to build architecture on your site. And then it's very hard when a standard like this comes out to just move everything around on your site to actually go with the standard. I get it. Having not been on the publisher side, but I developed publisher technology for many years, so I understand that difficulty. But this is all about evolution. Relatively speaking, the digital industry is a fairly nascent industry, right? You have the TV industry that's been around very long, transacted on a very specific measurement set. The direct mail industry has been around very long, transacts on a very specific measurement set. We actually didn't really have them in their places yet in our industry. So what we're seeing now is the evolution of measurement in our industry. And we shouldn't be scared of that because this is an evolution that will make our industry stronger, not weaker in time. So again, lean in to these trends, and I'm sure that 2017, there's going to be some additional metric that we have. But the fact of the matter is digital allows us to get very, very smart about measurement, about brand awareness. There's going to be a lot of measurement that can come out of the proliferation of digital across screens, across mobile, across programmatic TV when it comes, all of this sort of stuff. And we're going to start seeing some real pickup, because when you start being able to do attribution across all those screens, that's something that has never been available before. So you better believe that there's going to be different standards and different measurements that come out of that. And if we don't embrace them, we're going to have a problem, because then, how are we going to measure ourselves? How are we going to measure how successful we're being as an industry? So the upshot that I wanted to share here is that we are a work in progress as an industry, as a digital industry. But I would argue that that is really okay. That's okay, as long as we keep working toward progress, which is what we're seeing now. But I would argue that sometimes we don't lean in fast enough. We're sort of stand like a deer in headlights when something comes out or when a headline comes out, as opposed to like, okay, well, what can help me get ahead of this? What can help me manage or get data on this issue that is being brought up, and how can I be smarter about it? Because the fact of the matter is, the tools are available and being developed in a way that can get you smarter, both as a buyer of media, if it's what you are, as a platform, if that's what you are, and as a publisher, if that's what you are. And we have all of them in this room, so I'm talking to exactly the right audience. But we all have to lean into it, and it's not about being guarded about this type of data, because this should not be secret sauce kind of data, in my opinion. This is measurement standard data that we need to be very, very transparent about. Everybody has their secret sauce. Xaxis, we have our secret sauce too. But you're going to know what we believe is viewable and what we don't, because we're going to tell you what our tools say. That shouldn't be secret sauce. That should be table stakes. So let's talk about the user experience. And again, just going back a bit in history for me personally, when I ran 24/7, I had launched an organization. So for those that didn't know 24/7, we ran a publisher ad platform called Open AdStream, which we since sold to AppNexus. And we also had a media products business. And 24/7 was one of the early pioneers in what is the network business. We had pivoted to a media products company or about a year before we ended up merging with Xaxis. And as part of that transition, I launched something called Alchemy Ad Labs, which was basically a creative team that sat in our media business that developed ads in conjunction with the agency, took their raw creative assets and made an experience online that was more, let's say, interesting or engaging than what the raw assets were that we got from the agency originally. The reason that was fairly novel in that sense is that I think if you think of a network business, for those who were in the industry in the 2000s, you wouldn't think of a network business as one that had a creative shop inside of it. Fair to say? The reason that we launched that in the organization is because we saw that there was a break. There was a loss of experience for the user when we were launching these really large campaigns, and we said, well, there has to be a better way to do this. There has to be a way to engage the users on the other side in a better way than we're doing now. And that's why we launched that creative team. That creative team actually went, when we merged with Xaxis, and sits within Xaxis as Xaxis Ad Labs. So it's something that I'm not saying that I started it personally, but I believe very wholeheartedly that the experience of the user has got to be part of the discussion when you're talking about digital media, and specifically programmatic media. Because when we talk about programmatic media, sometimes we think about it as very mechanical. It's about efficiency. It's about scale. It's about just getting as much money spent as possible and as cheap as possible, depending on what your purview is. For us, it's about targeting the right audience at Xaxis because we're an audience buying company. But the rhetoric is not around user experience. So we wanted to change that dynamic and say, okay, we can buy very efficiently. We can buy your right target audience, but we're going to make that experience for the user more engaging than it would have been had we not been part of the transaction. And that's the way we all need to start thinking as well. Whether you're, again, a platform, hook into the platforms that make the engaging creatives. There's DCO platforms that can plug into DSP platforms that make creatives a lot more engaging, that change the assets very easily. If you are a buyer of media, really think about how your brand can enter the programmatic world in a different way than all the other brands are, because that's the way you can change the experience for the user. And if you're a publisher, create experiences on your site that make it more engaging for the users that come to your site on a regular basis. Because there's this concept where people are just becoming so blind to advertising because there's so much of it and it all looks the same. So how do you change the experience for the user that it's not an ad anymore, it's actually content that they're interested in looking at? And we've all seen the ad that actually captures your eye online. So you're numb to 95% of it, but what's the 5% that you actually pay attention to? That's what we need to be doing more of. Nobody likes to be followed. So for all of us who have friends that are not in the industry and you say what you do, I know the response from my friends are, hey, Nick, you're the one that follows me around. That shoe ad, I clicked on a pair of shoes last week, and the ad's been following me around all week, right? And I'm sure everybody's had that conversation with somebody, their parent, their kid, their friend, whatever. So this is a case where we took a really good idea and did not do a good job of executing on it. Because retargeting, in and of itself, works. It means that I showed interest in something. So conceptually speaking, if I showed interest in something, it makes sense for you as if you're an e-commerce platform. Let's say I'm looking for a formal dress, and I go to an e-commerce site, and I'm looking at all formal dresses, but I don't buy anything. So fair to say that I'm still in the market for it. But if you target me for, let's say, a week straight, and I don't click on any of the ads, and by the way, don't target me 8 times in 8 different sites that I go to, right? Because the problem is that you get off the site. I mean, I'm in the industry, so it doesn't creep me out because I know what the mechanics behind why it happens. But do you need to show me 8 straight ads on 8 straight sites, 10 minutes after I leave your website? No, probably not. And there's mechanics in the technologies that allow us to manage that process. But if you target me once a day, much less of an issue. Once every other day, much less of an issue. But if I don't click on that ad after a week, after I was actively on your site, let's say 3 days straight, looking at the same dresses, a pretty good shot that I've already bought a dress, and you could stop trying to target me with the dresses, right? But we have the data to make smarter decisions. We're just not implementing it. Again, as an industry, some players do this very, very well. But there's still plenty that aren't paying attention to this yet. But if we get smarter about this, the creepiness factor goes away, which I know that the ad blocking panel, I think, is right after me, I'm pretty sure. And part of the discussion around ad blocking is because of this. If you talk to people that want to block ads, it's the creep factor that's at issue, right? And that's something that's really manageable. So we need to just start paying attention to the user. This is user experience. This is not about engaging creative. This is simple user experience. So just just don't be annoying. And we're not paying attention enough to this. Again, different players, different kind of levels of issue there. One of the things that we talk about in Xaxis is, when does an ad cease to be an ad? And we all, at least I do click on ads. I don't click on all ads, but when does an ad cease to be an ad for me? An ad ceases to be an ad for me when it's something that's relevant to my interests or my needs, or just something that kind of piques my interest. Maybe I didn't even think that I wanted to go on vacation to the Bahamas, but this was like a really pretty picture, so I'm gonna click on it. So it ceases to be an ad, I would argue, when the ad becomes content for me. So how do we get more ads in front of people that are actually of interest, content for them? So I think that there's several ways to do it. One is the engagement factor, which I talked about before, as far as just concentrating more on the creative experience that we show to a user online. So one. Two is this bifurcation between big data and useful data. So there is a lot of, whether you're a first-party company and you're published and you have a lot of first-party data on users, or you're a platform that has a lot of second and third-party data, the data, like the notion of a data scientist, and I know that this is not a new notion, but I will rigorously agree with this. Data sciences are the future of digital advertising in many respects, because there's so much data being produced on a daily basis now, it is impossible to figure out the data that is actually useful and relevant without those people. Because we have so much data now, what are you gonna do with all of it? And very much of it is not particularly useful, but you have to find the pieces that are useful and make a puzzle out of the useful pieces to create relevancy to that user. And relevancy, in many cases, the growth of native, for example, native advertising. We have a native brand under Xaxis that is growing tremendously, and it's because native advertising is advertising, but it's content driven. So you know, based on where the person is and the fact that they're actually engaging with the content, that they have an interest in the subject at hand. It's the perfect marriage of content and advertising, native. So, and creative experiences, interesting creative experiences, I would argue, are equivalent to that. It's the cross-section of creative interest to the user, and relevance to the user. So this is something that we should all be concentrating on tremendously. I'm sure that in the panel after me, people are gonna have different views on where consumers fall out on this, but if we start paying attention as an industry, and I think this is actually very separate to the ad blocker conversation, I think people will mix the two subject matters up, regardless of what happens with the proliferation or not proliferation of ad blockers over the next year or two, we should be concentrating much more as an industry on user experience. And again, I don't care if you're an advertiser, an agency, a brand, or a platform. This is something that is our collective opportunity / problem right now, is creating better user experiences for users online, because it will change the dynamics of the industry if we start doing this better. And that has to do with creative, that has to do with targeting, and that has to do with leveraging technology in a smart way to avoid the creepiness factor, to ensure that we're actually targeting users, the right users with the right ad in the right setting. And that, I believe, is what will make advertising more welcome in the future. So I think, Steve, are we gonna take questions? Or I don't know how I did on my time.
How do you incentivize people throughout the chain towards some of these goals? I mean, some of the flaws are in part driven by people, media buyers at all different levels finding, look, yeah, it would be nice to implement some of the etiquette around retargeting, but more money is to be made by at least people on the line buying the ads by just pumping the system with more ads. So how do we build incentives into the system towards these higher goals?
Yeah, so I think it's happening organically, frankly, and I don't think that there's a brand that would want users to be turned off to their brand because this is happening. You know, I think the brands themselves aren't, they might be aware of it, but they're not managing it themselves. Like these are platform plays. And I think, again, the people that run the platforms and the people that see the data are the ones that have to bring it up and say, like, hey, actually, if we just show this ad, 3 times in 3 days, we see that the results are actually equivalent without having to waste all these cycles on showing the ad 10 times, let's say. But you have to show the data to the advertisers and the agencies to do that. I don't think that anybody is necessarily, especially because of the viewable CPM, and a lot of the e-commerce players that we're talking about that this happens to are actually very driven by conversions as opposed to just CPM, that eventually if players are just trying to pipe the wheels just to get the CPMs up, that if they're not getting the conversions, it's going to bite them anyway. Because they're, in the end, they're ultimately going to be measured on performance, i.e. conversions, as opposed to just showing a whole bunch of ads.
Nick, oh, hang on.
Hi, Ailey Ashry with Gold Lasso. I'm from the email world, where the problem of bots is very minuscule. And you kept mentioning tools and tools, but you didn't mention what they are or how they're implemented to prevent bots. So I'm just kind of curious, for someone that's not as familiar with that space, what processes and tools are you referring to for suppressing bot action?
So I didn't mention names because I don't want to sound like a commercial for companies.
Or methodology.
Yeah. So basically, the way functionally that these tools work is that when you partner with them, let's say you're on the buy side, you actually implement their pixel in the campaign. So it becomes basically part of your wrapper. And when the tool essentially goes out to bid on an impression, if it knows that user because of previous history, basically, and it sees that it performs like a bot based on what it knows. Like, bots have very predictable, at least most bots have very predictable behavior. So these tools, they see so much of the web that they say, like, all right, I know based on the previous touch points that I've had with this user, being whatever cookie it is, I know that this is a bot. So it goes out before the ad gets delivered, and it doesn't let you bid on that ad. And it's called pre-bid, and that's how it avoids you actually bidding on the ad in the first place if you're an advertiser. Now, it's not perfect, because if it doesn't have enough, and this is what I mean, we're moving very, very quickly, but unfortunately, bad actors in any industry always try to stay one step ahead. So if the technology hasn't seen that user yet, and let's say like it's a new bot, there's a potential that you would deliver to that bot. But again, out of that 7.2 billion, I don't know the number, so I don't want to just take a guess. But I would surmise that the vast majority of that are known behavior bots, and then a very, very small amount. So you might lose some. There might be some seepage, but not to the extent of a tune of 7.2 billion.
What do you think are the organizational hurdles if these solutions exist? And what are the organizational hurdles then to really kind of make sure that to implement it?
They cost money.
Got it.
They cost money, right? They're not free.
But if they're going to save,
you're introducing a new cost into the ecosystem, and it really has to be on both sides, right? Because you have the buy side that basically wants to verify their own buys, fair, right? The advertisers and the agencies want to they're creating their own standardized metrics. So many times the agencies use basically the same tool on the buy side, so they're creating their own measurement standard on the buy side. And on the publisher side, they basically have to implement the same. Now, the publishers very often are not being paid any more money to implement it, so it just automatically gets cut off their bottom line, right? And it's a business challenge. There's no question about it. There's a business challenge, but I think this is the type of changing dynamics that we all have to get comfortable with, and we have to eventually, we're going to have to course correct to make sure that everybody can stay in business and have a healthy ecosystem, but it doesn't mean that the problem's going to go away if we don't implement these tools, right? And you can't expect advertisers to spend $7.2 billion because we choose not to implement the tools available to solve a lot of it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I wasn't out.
Oh.
Xaxis has so much data. Oh, Andrew Eklund, I'm with Cicerone. We're a digital agency in Minneapolis. And so I'm looking at this from a creative standpoint, and I waited 19 and a half of my 20 years to say it was time to be in the display world because a lot of it just didn't work in the fraud problems of the past 6 years. And so if you were to overlay what works, and what I mean is what works for the user and what works for the advertiser, maybe we're going to do a classic Venn diagram, and overlay that with available inventory. How much overlap is there? So for example, if we say that it's a certain kind of creative that just busts out from standard IAB, whatever it might be, display units, and all of a sudden it's just something that really works, but there really is very little of that inventory available. Isn't that a huge problem of the creative challenge that's out there for the user?
Yeah, so the answer is I don't have a perfect answer for your question about the Venn diagram, but this is what I will say. The IAB, I think, does a pretty good job of incorporating new IAB formats that basically look to this kind of thing. Something that they have the rising star formats, which look to address exactly the issue you're talking about, which is more engaging ads. That was the IAB's answer to trying to create a standard so that you actually create standard inventory across the entire digital ecosystem to address the need for more creative formats. And within those creative formats, a company like ours at Xaxis, our creative team basically works towards building creative experiences within those formats so that we can find scale in them. Then you have sort of the, you could potentially say like a bigger experience but less inventory if you do like more of a sponsorship play. That's not our business at Xaxis, but that certainly exists within the agencies where they do something with a very specific site or sites and create a very specific user experience for that. That is very hard to replicate in a programmatic, scaled fashion, but I think that world will continue to exist, and it should. My lens, for full disclosure, is always programmatic, scale, and targeting audiences at scale, because that's what Xaxis does through leveraging Turbine and through our publisher and agency relationships, and that's how we at Xaxis tackle a problem, and we're over $1 billion media company. So it's possible. Do we come up with scale issues sometimes? Absolutely. Sometimes it's hard to find exactly the formats we need at the scale we need them. It happens. Specifically in video, there's definitely a shortage of inventory and premium in video in most places in the world, not just the U.S. And I think as more programmatic TV becomes digital and becomes addressable in digital, that should at least get better. I don't know if it'll be perfect. We'll see. Time will tell. But that will take time. That will take time. And that's why you see the proliferation of the, I'm trying to think of what they're called, the outstream units in video, where you're scrolling and then all of a sudden a video appears as you're scrolling down the page. They're called outstream. It's creation of new video content in places that it didn't exist before, to try to actually grow video inventory. So you see that happening in all the markets that are video constrained right now.
Nicole, thank you very much, Nicole.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Let me ask Toby and our panel to come up to drill even deeper into the question of ad blocking, which is at least for one of the questions that we had is in forming this panel is technology part of the problem or part of so let's get everybody up. Come on up on stage, our panel. There's Dave. And again, taking the lead is Toby Elkin, the editor of our Real-Time Daily News, covers all things programmatic, has recently rejoined MediaPost after several years at eMarketer, and then before that, so a number of years with us in an ad age. So please welcome our, I think, what's going to be a very active ad blocking panel that includes AdBlock Plus, which is apparently in exile from the IAB, but very welcome here. Welcome, Toby, and the panel.
Hi, good morning. Can everyone hear? Good morning, and great to have you here. And I think Nicole Pangis from Zaxis set us up really well with a lot of data points, and I have a few more. And I just want to introduce the panel. We've got, excuse me, Mark Addison, Minister of Special Affairs, AdBlock Plus, to my immediate left. Carol Chung, SVP Media Technology, Digitas LBI. And Dave Zinman, COO, Radium One. And just as a little brief background, Carol's clients are among the biggest national advertisers at Digitas LBI. She's got Amex, Whirlpool, Delta, Taco Bell, and Fitbit are among her clients, and big brand advertisers. Dave from Radium One works with 40 of the top 100 digital advertisers, and has many, many clients, both publishers and national advertisers. So that, and Mark will get his own. He's going to introduce us to himself in a moment. And I have a few data points that I wanted to express to you. And you've probably, maybe you've lived under a rock if you haven't heard some of these about ad blocking. Back a few months ago, PageFair and Adobe released that report that everybody quotes from August 2015, that ad blocking is estimating at a $21.8 billion loss in ad revenue globally in 2015. This is due to ad blocking. $21.8 billion estimated in 2015. And in the U.S., the estimate was projected to reach $10.7 billion in 2015 and $20.3 billion in 2016. So that's double. And in the U.S., ad blocking grew 48% in the 12 months leading up to June 2015. That's 45 million users, or 16% of the population, who said that they were ad blocking. And PageFair estimated that Google lost $6.6 billion in global ad revenue due to ad blocking. 63% of U.S. millennials are using ad blockers, according to Fractal and Moz. And that's probably growing. And then a few weeks ago, how many of you heard from the IAB Leadership Conference the incendiary comments from the CEO and president of the IAB, Randy Rothenberg, who basically labeled ad blockers profiteers, a threat to free speech, and he blasted ad blocking as, quote, an old-fashioned extortion racket gussied up in the flowery but false language of contemporary consumerism. So all of you probably have heard some of these or all of these comments. So ad blocking's not going to be going away anytime soon. And I just want to get, by a show of hands, how many of you are marketers? Agencies? Ad tech companies? Okay, so mostly ad tech companies and brand marketers in this room at this moment. So I guess those are just some of the introductory points about kind of the seriousness of ad blocking and how it's grown, and what the implications are. And Nicole referred to the deal with Shine. Shine, an Israeli tech startup, only last week said that, it's a European mobile carrier, and it's planning to block what it calls excessive, intrusive, unwanted, or irrelevant ads on its network. That's a mobile network. So this is kind of setting up perhaps more mobile carriers to do the same thing. And that's pretty major news, because most of us are on our mobile phones, and that's where we're getting ads and content. So I want to start by having Mark introduce himself, because it's a little easier with the agency people. We know what they do, and we'll hear more about their point of view. But Mark, why don't you tell us where you stand and where you're coming from?
Wow, with an introduction like that. So those numbers actually are I've read all those numbers. It's kind of fun watching your life being described by the media sometimes. But it's been called the largest consumer boycott in history by a Harvard law professor. So it is a very serious topic. That's the word I was looking for. But let me give you a little history about where AdBlock Plus comes from, and the ad blocking phenomenon is continuing, and we're not the only ad blocker. And I think when I explain where we come from, you'll realize that we're actually trying to do right by the consumer and do right by advertisers. But there's this phenomenon going on. So ad blocking is not new. The first ad blocker came out in 1996 when there wasn't a heck of a lot to block. It was called WebWasher, and basically it stripped out all of the rich media completely from the web and just delivered a text-based. David, you probably know about this. We got started as one person in 2006. There was some open source code, and a gentleman named Vladimir Palant forked that code, called it AdBlock Plus, and started offering it for people to use. And at the time, it's still, the AdBlock Plus is still run like an open source project. We have got a community of about 22,000 volunteers. All of our filter lists are put out in the open public forum. Everything that we do is actually posted on public internet pages for all of you to find. So any question that you have, I mean, I'm going to answer a lot, but any question that you have, 20 minutes of earnest Googling, you will find the answer on some web page that we maintain.
Acceptableads.org, right?
Yeah, that's one of them. So we started 10 years ago with just one guy, and he looked around and he said, some of the advertising has just got really egregious, and I want to rid the internet of that awful stuff. And that was all he wanted to do. And in 2007, PC Magazine named it one of the top 100 products of the year, right after just 1 year in business. Along came actually an investor around 2008, a gentleman named Tim Schumacher. He had just sold the company. He had some money. He looked at this. He said, that has a lot of promise. It's an interesting product. It's good for the internet ecosystem, but it's not coded very well. So, Vladimir, why can't you make it better? And Vladimir says, well, it's a part-time gig. So he said, well, I'll cover your living expenses for 1 year, make it better. So he did, and downloads went up. And around 2009, we get a call from Eric Martin from Reddit, founder of Reddit. And he says, guys, you're killing us. And we go, what do you mean we're killing you? Well, all my users are blocking my ads right now, and I can't monetize, and I'm trying to sell gold subscriptions and everything like that to make up the revenue difference. And it's like, wow, had no idea we were having that kind of an impact on the ecosystem. right? We had no idea that we had grown to that scale. And I speak the royal we now because I wasn't involved with the company back then, but I know the history. So then we decided, well, we need to do something responsible about that. With our power comes responsibility. So we created a way to whitelist any website. So with one click, and it's there today, click on the stop sign, click disable, done. Support your favorite websites. And we put on our blog and try to encourage our users, support your favorite websites, block responsibly, whitelist the ads that you want to support, that you feel like they're doing a good job for society and they deserve the ad revenues that are due to them. And so that worked for a while, but then Vladimir said, not enough people are doing that. So he said, I think I could create a market incentive for better advertising. If we block the bad stuff and whitelist the good stuff, we'll get better advertising. There will be a market incentive to make better advertising. So that's when he created, around 2011, a whitelist, and he turned it on by default. And this was not really kosher with our users. I mean, we had a lot of users going, guys, what part of AdBlock Plus do you not understand? And this is when we even had other people go off and start other ad blocking companies, right? But we thought it was the right thing to do. So, and to this day, we deliver our product with that whitelist turned on by default. People can still turn it off if they want to. But you'll see that every decision we make is still made very much like an open source company. We are the voice of the consumer in all this. There's fascinating technology being developed. There's fascinating experience being done, and we're kind of that little voice that says, well, but hold on. I'm like Nicole said, I'm the user experience, right? I'm the person at the end who's basically paying the freight. I'm the consumer who buys the products from the advertiser, or from the brand, who then can afford to, run the ads in the first place. And so that's our role now. We are the champion of that user and that user experience. And that's how we approach things. It's kind of a very philosophical, moral approach, but I'm giving you that story because then you'll understand where we're coming from and how we make decisions.
I have to interrupt you. Mark and I spoke last night. He's a good guy, but he's representing a company that is trying to position itself in a moral way. And I looked online after we had our panel prep, and the company is for profit, and they make money by getting the publishers to basically pay extortion fee to them to allow the ads to be served. So, in spite of all, it's a good story, and I'm sure it started off as like this open source project in somebody's garage, whatever, but now it's a for-profit company that's trying to make a tax, and it's 30% tax. So it's not a trivial tax.
Dave, explain to everybody how that works.
It's an amazing tax. You guys know when you do ad serving, and what percentage of the media cost is the ad serving? It's really small. It's very small, and these guys are charging 30% if you, as a publisher, want to have your ads served to the users that have installed AdBlock Plus. So yeah, what part of AdBlock Plus do you not understand? I'm sure the users are saying that, but the company's funding itself that way and trying to extract 30%. I don't think there's much difference between that and, somebody walking into a shop and saying, nice shop, it'd be a shame if something happened to it. That's honestly what's going on. In all fairness, and Mark is a good guy. He's the one guy in the US from AdBlock Plus,
yes.
And I appreciate him coming here. It's like walking into the lion's den, but the reality of what they do is what it is. And yes, there are a bunch of consumers that don't like ads, and we can talk about what to do about that. But we can separate that from a for-profit company that's trying to make money off it.
It's good points, Dave. So, Mark, how would you respond to that?
Should we give Carol a chance first, or before I respond?
Well, I think I want you to respond first, and what does the advertising community and the publisher community, what do they misunderstand? What do they misunderstand about? What are the chief misconceptions against the backdrop of what Dave is saying?
You know, I hear your story, and so we have become a business. Over the 10 years, we've evolved considerably. We now run 40 servers worldwide, and we're working now with 40 of the top Alexa 100 companies, as similar to what Dave says, but with some very important differences. We are able to, through this whitelisting process, through the acceptable ads process, which we haven't explained yet, that's why I wanted to say, Kara wanted to talk about this, but we'll have to come back to that. But we work with the companies representing the consumer, saying, look, this inventory of ads, you need to make it better. And here's the open source, crowdsourced criterion for what a good ad is and what our acceptors are, what our users are willing to accept. We polled our users. We found out they don't necessarily hate advertising. They don't want to destroy the web. They don't want to kill off the economic engine that drives the internet. They just hated the really egregious stuff. And what's happening now is they trust us to help make that decision because we've stayed true to their wishes. We haven't sold them out. We've gone through incredible, aches and pains to make sure that we've got a process to crowdsource the definition, to vet every. By the way, any of you can apply for whitelisting, and you can apply for free, and you can just do it on the web. There's no secret method to this. And so those 40 of the Alexa top 100 companies that are working with us, what they've realized is that we've almost become like this channel to this coveted demographic of millennials and tech-savvy people who have the wherewithal to know that they can block ads and sort of define the internet experience on their terms. And we can say, all right, you know what? They don't block everything. We're not this blunt instrument. We're not black and white. They're willing to accept some ads. They're willing to accept the ads that we have decided are acceptable according to their wishes. And we can sit there and then at this ad server, and we can actually say, okay, here's a regular user. You can show them anything. We don't mess with your business. But here's one of our users. If you want to show them an ad, it has to be from your inventory of acceptable ads. And then you can show the ads. And guess what happens? The CPMs go up. The click-throughs go up. There's a segment of the market that wants a better ad experience. And that's what we become.
I think we all want a better ad experience. Carol, since your work is with leading national advertisers, these people are paying a ton of money to get in front of people. What are you seeing in terms of the impact on your clients, and what is your take on what Mark has been saying?
So there definitely is quite a bit of concern, and we're doing our best to monitor adoption rates. We are looking at alternative channels that currently can't be blocked, like in-app inventory, for example.
In-app inventory, okay.
And finding ways to create an in-app PMP highlighted by App Store popularity or something like that. So we're definitely looking at things like that. I think what's most concerning, which I'm sure we've tapped a lot, is about transparency and fees. And I think that's a general concern that our advertisers have, especially in the programmatic space. And so we are doing the best that we can to limit taxation across the board and better understand what fees we're paying for and the value that it's adding. So.
Right. And Dave, what would you add to that? Do you have something?
I mean, there's a lot of things, hopefully we'll have time to get into what the industry can do, both on the publisher side and the advertiser side, to try to ameliorate some of this. There's, from the publisher side, I wish that publishers would be more engaged in this issue. Publishers today largely are just taking it on the chin. So if you're a publisher and 10 or 20% of your audience is using ad blocking, you just kind of accept it as part of what you need to do, and you need to figure out how to make the economics work for your business as a result. And you keep serving content to these people. These people are free riders, the people that are blocking ads. They are taxing the servers of these publishers. They're basically stealing the content and stripping out the monetization the publishers need to survive. And the publishers at some point won't take it. I mean, there are some publishers that have already responded by blocking their content, which I think is completely acceptable. I'd like to see more publishers do that. I'd like to see more publishers maybe replace the ads with messaging directly to the users, reminding them that they're stealing the content and they're not supporting the sites. There's a lot that can be done on the publisher side to be more aggressive about dealing with ad blocking, and it's just the industry just hasn't really engaged with it yet. But I think it's a process of education and publishers beginning to track what they're missing, and they're going to be quite shocked, and I think a lot of them are going to take advantage of it.
And Dave, in fact, Wired magazine it was February 12th, said that it would block anyone who uses an ad blocker from viewing its site. So there are publishers that are premium publishers that are taking aggressive action.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely necessary. I mean, we know the publishing community, those guys that are creating the content themselves, it's not crowdsourced content, but it's, they're creating the content, it costs money to do it. And that business needs to be supported. And, it may be starting with a renegade group of consumers, but it's spreading to more mainstream users. And unfortunately, that means that these publishers, a lot of them are going to be significantly hurt, and so they can pay the extortion fee, or they can, or they can be more aggressive with these users and say, "Look, we'd love to give you our content, but we can't unless you're willing to accept the way that we fund our content."
So what are some of I'd like to speak to some of the solutions that publishers, potential solutions that publishers are coming up with that you know of, and also for advertisers. You spoke about pricing, some pricing scenarios. Can you speak to those issues, both of you?
Sure, I can go. So there definitely is, we need to track how this is going to play out, right? So it's either going to, the majority is going to become whitelisted, or there's going to be kind of like a boycott of ad blocking in itself. I think where we kind of advise our advertisers is let that play out, but what's important for you is to make smart bets. And so there is a misconception sometimes when you hear about ad blocking. You think, oh, my ad is getting loaded and it's getting blocked in real time and I'm paying for these impressions. And the truth is that that's not quite happening, right? So it's really just limiting the supply that you have opportunities to be called for your advertising. So that's kind of the first misconception that we get over. But if you play that out, what's going to happen is your supply is going to dwindle a little bit. And so what's important is, and I think we talked a lot about this yesterday, is about measurement. And so if you can connect true measurement with your data, then how do we move from tactics where you're doing kind of like very efficient reach, kind of like your spray and pray mentality and looking for, a lot of supply at very low cost. I think that is probably going to become less and less efficient if it plays out towards the ad blocking scenario. And I think that it kind of makes programmatic more essential, actually, because you got to place smarter bets. So you got to really look at your data, look at the context, and in real time make decisions about, do I want this person and what am I willing to pay for them? And I think when we do that in certain places like retargeting, you're able to pay a lot more. And so I think that's, as an advertiser, our strategy to kind of deal with kind of the slurry that's going on right now.
Yeah, let me just add, I think, at Radium One, what we're trying to do is invest a lot in cross-device, because the idea is that everybody has multiple devices, and there may be certain browsers on certain devices that have ad blocking installed. But if you can identify the user across multiple devices, you have a much better chance of reaching that user and maintaining the reach that you need to get your message out. And so I think there are ways around dealing with ad blocking, but that's from the advertiser side. From the publisher side, where the rubber really meets the road, which is where the revenue is going to be directly impacted. It's a severe issue, and there are some choke points. There's one of the larger, I won't mention the name, one of the larger publishers in the U.S. told me that he doesn't want to block the content from going to the users who have ad blocking, because then, in effect, those users will bounce away and they won't get credit in ComScore for the reach numbers that they care about, right? Which is ridiculous. I mean, it's, that's just all of us collectively in the industry creating a problem. So I think ComScore and Nielsen are probably choke points where if we get those guys to not count reach against ad block users, which makes a lot of sense, then I think what you'd find is that you'd find a lot of publishers being willing to be more aggressive about dealing with ad blocking, which I think would eventually correct the problem, or at least counterbalance, so users would feel the pain. The users need to feel the pain of making the choice of stealing the content and blocking the ads, and the best way to do that is at the publisher level. But this is stuff that hasn't happened yet. I haven't heard anyone from ComScore or Nielsen talk about this, but this is something that needs to happen as an industry.
And from the organization that represents the users, I say, be very careful about how you do that. We have come to with the approach that we want to find a sustainable way forward. We want to find a model that lets publishers and content creators be monetized in an acceptable way to the users. We can't betray our users, because then they'll just go to another ad blocker that blocks everything, and that would be like the nuclear bomb option, which I don't think is a sustainable way forward.
I appreciate that, but that's said from a for-profit company that wants to charge 30% to allow the ads through. Again, this is like, it's a great story, and I think if I were, somehow in another universe in an ad block company, I might say the same thing. But the reality is, we know, like, to charge 30% on potentially, if everyone adopted it, on $6 billion in blocking, okay, that's a big business, all right? So I get it. They're trying to make a big business. But the reality is, we as an industry have to deal with that, and they're not going away. And so, I just don't want to allow a company like that to have the moral high ground in this. I mean, we need to draw a line here.
Take morality out of the equation. It's an economic equation. The consumers have made an economic equation or evaluation. If the consumer doesn't value the ad enough to say, yeah, I'm willing to take that ad in exchange for the content, then I'd say that the value exchange hasn't been met. And the only reason why consumers have had to accept the value exchange up to this point is they didn't have a choice. They had to accept whatever was shoveled in front of them. Now that they do have a choice, they're very clearly declaring what their economic value exchange is. And so we're saying, make better ads, make the value exchange worth it, and we have a sustainable way forward.
Sorry, I don't agree. I completely don't agree. I think the consumer choice should be, do you want to block the ads and not get the content? Or do you want to pay for the content and not get the ads? Or do you just want to take the ads and the content? And I think overwhelmingly consumers would choose to get the content with the ads if those are the choices. And those are not the choices today. They will be the choices because the industry won't have any choice. So there's a game being played now. I think people can see that. It's just, again, this is an economics argument. That's what it is.
Carol?
Anything to add?
Isn't it an argument over who has the power to determine what an acceptable ad is? You want the publishers to have that control.
Yeah.
You want to define what it is. You don't mind that Forbes is deciding that it will respond by serving a light version of itself, but it's the one who's going to define what that experience is, and Mark believes he's representing the users in defining that. So it's a question of control. This is an argument over power and control, over who defines that good experience, right?
Right, and we've pretty loudly declared that we believe that belongs to the consumer.
Right, it belongs to the consumer, and the consumer has the control. They don't have to go. If you go to Forbes and you see that interstitial before you can get to the content, as a consumer, you don't have to go to Forbes again if you don't want to. Okay, but you don't have the right to say, oh, you know what, Forbes, I'm going to change your experience and strip out your ads because I just want to get your content without having an ad experience.
There's a gentleman in the audience.
Yeah, we have a lot of questions,
Yeah.
and I want to make sure, I want to make sure we have time to get to them, and that was just the kickoff.
I'd like this gentleman here who stood up. He has a point to make.
Hi, I'm Chris with Pulse Point, and for Mark. So if your users only object to a certain classification of ads, those that they collectively deem as being acceptable ads, then why not unblock the unacceptable ads across all websites today?
Yeah, so Chris and I talked about this at the bar last night. What he wanted us to do was just automatically whitelist everybody on the ComScore 1000. So.
Only for the unacceptable.
Yeah,
Only for the acceptable ads.
Only for the unacceptable. So and so, Chris, my offer to you is let's encourage all of them to apply, because I take a look at the ComScore 1000, and I think most of them would qualify for free whitelisting. Okay, so we didn't get into this whole discussion, but we do this as a service for most companies absolutely for free.
The whitelisting.
The whitelisting process, right? That's what lets certain acceptable ads through the filters. That's what sustains the revenue model. Let's not make any bones about this, because Chris is going to ask me anyway. He goes, but you do charge money, the 30% that David is talking about. The largest advertisers, oh, thank you. Excuse me. As David said, I'm in the lion's den. It's quite unnerving sometimes. So encourage them to apply. Know that for the largest ones, in order to make that service free for all the smaller ones, we're going to ask the larger ones to sponsor us and pay, as David has outlined.
What was the threshold? I honestly don't remember. But it was pretty low, like for the number of impressions per month to be free.
I thought it was 10,000
No.
impressions.
So yeah, and we're going to be publishing, even more. This is all out there if you do some earnest Googling.
It's online. You can find it. Yeah.
But we're going to actually make new web pages to explain this even more explicitly so that everybody understands. But if the incremental lift that you get after you have been whitelisted, if that incremental lift exceeds 10 million impressions per month, 10 million, then that's the sort of the threshold where we ask, hey, you know what, help us sponsor this effort, make it available for all.
Hi.
That doesn't seem to answer, I'm just one more moment, that doesn't seem to satisfy you.
No, absolutely not. You didn't answer the question, in fact. There's two classifications of ads that you're saying. There's acceptable and unacceptable ads. Why not blanket across the entire internet, allow the acceptable ads through? Absolutely.
Yep. Because the way it works is you have to apply for the whitelisting process.
That's a decision on your product team, and let all acceptable ads through, yes or no?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, honestly, from the advertiser perspective, it has nothing to do with the publisher. It's an acceptable ad. It should be an acceptable ad regardless of who it came from.
Right, and it needs to be tagged at the servers. You can, by the way, any of you, well, actually, I was going to say any of you could whitelist it, but you're not running ad blockers. But actually, I ran across a study that says you guys are 44% more likely to be running an ad blocker than the rest of the public. So those of you who are running an ad blocker, in AdBlock Plus, you can one-click disable any ad, acceptable or not acceptable. You can whitelist the whole website.
Can I see a show of hands of how many of you here, advertising and media professionals, are using ad blockers? Everybody raise your hand. We've got one person?
That's why no.
Let the record show
They
one in the
are. They're
back.
not going to raise the.
I agree with Dave, because if you think about it, in traditional media, consumers don't have a choice. They get the ads because that's what pays for the content to be created and then consumed. Everybody can go on their browser and clear their cookies, clear their cache, clear all of that. So for a publisher, whatever medium they are, they're in the business to publish content. Even NPR, they have sponsorships. They pay for the content. So I just think I'm on Dave's side of the fence here, and it's like the publishers are producing the content. People should either pay for it either via their monetization or pay for the content through a walled garden or decide not to get the content. That's just, I mean, having been around on both sides of the media side, and I know there's a lot of privacy issues with what we're able to gather, but people get stuff, people have information, privacy, like information that they can get from other things that their behaviors. So I just thought it was interesting when you take our industry and think of advertising and media across I think we're making more out of it. The consumers can make a choice to either pay for it or not.
The consumers can make a choice. There's a wonderful chapter in a book by Walter Isaacson, And it's talking about the first meeting between Vint Cerf and Marc Andreessen. So as most of you know, Vint Cerf is the guy who invented the HTTP protocol that gave us the web that you are able to extract money from today. And Marc Andreessen, who created the first Mosaic browser, which became Netscape, which really the pivotal moment there was that he was able to serve rich media. That was kind of like his big shtick. Well, Vint Cerf did not like that, okay? He looked at this HTTP protocol that he developed, and he said, that content creator, okay? So there was a competing architecture for that, and that probably would have been a good way to construct the web. It didn't work out that way. So I understand your argument, but there was no a priori right for advertisers to extract a whole bunch of money for the web and become aggregators and to create this whole ecosystem in the first place.
Could you state your name and affiliation?
Yeah, hey, Itai Rad from Warner Music. So I also kind of side with Dave on this. My big problem is the risk. So in general, I completely agree with the concept where this is like a monetization, this is how publishers are providing the content. Consumers need to understand that there's a way to let them know this is what's been happening and how they should behave accordingly. That said, the risk there is reading the ad tech from responsibility, like ad tech industry, right? So everything Nicole was talking about creating a better experience and making sure we regulate the frequency and the way we serve ad experience for the user. When you say, well, I'll just make it for consumers, you either want it or not, I agree with the concept, but that's a big danger for ad tech companies to say, well, either way, this is going to work, so we don't have any responsibility to make the experience better. And that's very dangerous because you could say AdBlock Plus is, an economic, they want to do business. Ad tech companies are probably worse, and in that sense, so that's something to take into consideration when how do you make sure that you keep your responsibility on the ad tech companies and the DSPs to serve a better experience while doing that, not that the answer is necessarily Mark's company, because I agree, like even whitelisting specific sites, like at the end of the day, I don't know how AdBlock works, but I doubt you could control the full experience, and I doubt, we got to really analyze what is the reason people are blocking ads. It's not necessarily on a specific site. Maybe it's a frequency across sites. Maybe it's the way the ads are shown, and that's coming from a lot of different places. Not just like whitelisting publishers is not going to solve that. So.
Yeah, no, I agree with your point. I mean, there's definitely, you can look across user experience, across a wide swath of content and entertainment, and we all can see bad user experiences. There's just no question. The nice thing about the online in general is that there's a lot of competition, so that every content category tends to have a lot of competition, and so publishers need to fight to maintain those users. And they have to make choices about, well, how do I fund what I'm doing and at the same time create a good user experience? And that dynamic exists at every publisher. And so, for example, I was running the display business for Yahoo in North America, and we were constantly trying to determine how many ads are the right number of ads to put on the page, and how interruptive should the ads be, and there was a lot of internal debate about it because you could feel it, you could actually measure it. We had a great A/B testing system, so you could run a version of a page with a certain number of ads and another version with another number of ads, and you could see what happened over time to those consumers. How much did their engagement with Yahoo change over time? And that was really important, and Yahoo got its clock cleaned, in mail, probably because of the ad experience. More than anything else. I mean, there were other issues with mail, but that kind of competition, that dynamic exists in the marketplace today. And so at an individual publisher level, if you're successful, you're probably spending time trying to understand how to make a good user experience. That absolutely is true. The problem is you've got some actors on the advertiser side, you said, that are spreading ads across, that maybe are following people. So it's more of a privacy issue than an actual ad presentation issue. And that one, every advertiser can manage that, because every advertiser can decide which companies are placing pixels on their site and tracking their users, and those companies could be then serving ads to those users in an uncontrolled way. And so advertisers can control that, and advertisers have some incentive to not bombard users as well.
That's a really good point. Dave, and I want to get Carol in here of what your reaction to that, and also what are some of the recommendations that you're making to your very high-profile national advertisers about this issue?
So for us, it comes back to ROI and performance. How do we help our clients set up a measurement strategy that correlates directly back to their bottom line? How do you avoid, especially in a branding conversation, things that are potentially gameable metrics, where bots, things like that can, recreate plays and views and even viewability?
Non-human traffic.
Exactly. How do you filter all of that noise out? And I think it's just about making really, smarter decisions. I keep coming back to that, and we've been working on some things in-house where we look at kind of an experimental design approach to tech, where we constantly have a control set of looking for incrementality. So I agree that you can go down the route of being too aggressive and turn people off. You can turn people off with discount messaging that you think is attractive, but then they can't find the rate, and so you create negative sentiment. So it's all about a constant testing to ensure that what you're putting out into the market has incremental beneficial lift.
Can you give any examples, Carol, without, you don't have to say the name of the client, but maybe the category of client, about any recent examples of where you're really working your way through this issue with them?
Well, so, from where I sit in the media tech space, we're doing a lot of evaluation on technology and the ad tech landscape, and I think the underlying theme here is what is currently being taxed, and to the point discussed today, is that 30% just being kind of applied from a publisher side back to my client, because someone's got to pay for it, right? And so we are looking at how we move more of the control in-house. And so I think, Rob yesterday was talking about moving contracts in-house. We've actually been looking at how do you take that a step further? How do you move the tech in-house?
How do you move the tech in-house?
Yeah.
Steve,
we have to wrap.
We don't have any more time for questions.
But this is going to be, I'm guessing, the biggest roundtable at the end of the morning.
Okay.
And Dave is going to be leading the roundtable.
Okay.
Mark and Carol, I hope that you can join it. We will have protection. But Toby Panel,
he's
be
doing
ashamed
a good
if something
job.
happened to him.
Thank you.
Thanks very much,
everybody.
guys.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're by the way, thanks, Mark. It's brave of you to come, and we really appreciate you come up. We're going to sort of keep the focus a little bit on the publishing and experience side. We're going to be talking about header bidding, one of the biggest developments of the last year, especially on the supply side. Header bidding, which helped publishers move beyond sort of the waterfall approach to selling their inventory, open up more inventory for better bidding. From their perspective, better monetization of the advertising. One of the things we wanted to get at in this panel, though, is what does it mean for the buy side? How does this approach to selling impact the ways in which ads are being bought? To take the lead on this, we welcome back again a member of our programming committee, Andy Sandoval from Media Kitchen. He runs programmatic there. Andy, take it away.
All right. So I was just saying to these guys, I don't know how we're going to follow that up because that was pretty intense. So, so header bidding and header bidding for buyers. Maybe a little bit less exciting, which is funny because I actually thought it was one of the hotter topics we're going to talk about today. But after that, wow, who knows? So I'm going to introduce my panel to start off with. So I have Ashley Evanson to my left, and she's a digital media strategist at Cicerone. Tim Sheets from OpenX, Senior Director of Monetization. Over there? Yeah, geez. And then Felix Sang, Director of Biz Development at Weather.com. So I think this is header bidding for buyers, but I know there are some publishers here, and I think it would be useful to start with the publisher perspective really quick, just because obviously as buyers we have to really follow what's going on in that space. So Felix, I'd like to start with you since you're on the direct pub side. Talk to me about, you said you've been kind of in this space for a few years now, so can you just walk me through your experiences there, how it's been, and kind of the unique challenges you have for Weather.com?
Yeah, so we've been in the space for about a couple of years, and it started with several advertisers coming to us saying that they needed a more direct integration into our supply. Kind of the theme that you've been hearing from all the advertisers here, taking control of the technology in-house. And we had several advertisers who wanted to take the first step. And we were very open to that approach. We started with 2 advertisers who did that, and it has been a very fruitful for both sides, for the publisher side and for the advertiser side. From our side, obviously, we have a direct relationship with the advertiser. We can troubleshoot any issues that we see. Instead of going through multiple third parties, we can address issues quickly. From the advertiser side, they gain access to a higher priority of our inventory, giving them access to more of the users that they want, and they're able to really buy the users that they want quickly rather than trying to troubleshoot some third-party technology that they have no control over.
Thanks. And speaking to just publisher adoption a little bit more, Tim, when we spoke, you kind of gave me some stats about what you're seeing over at OpenX, and obviously you guys are a big player. You released your wrapper last week, or announced it at least. Talk to me a little bit about adoption and just kind of your priorities.
Sure. So header bidding has re-energized ad tech in many ways, at least on the publisher side. And for us, we've seen massive adoption in 2015, a 330% increase in header bidding volume year over year. And today, I think 1 in 5 impressions in our exchange comes in via a header bidding integration. So for us, it's been huge. And for the most part, publishers have had great experiences and revenue's gone up by significant percentages across the board. So excited to talk more about the benefits to the buy side.
All right, and with that, so I mean, really now getting away from kind of the publisher side and moving over to the buyers and the conversations we've been having, I think everyone's motivations are pretty much the same, so it hasn't really changed our motivations. Obviously, publishers want to maximize yield. OpenX, you want to help them do that, and then on the buy side, we want the best stuff for our clients. But I've seen a little bit of shifting in who's talking to who and really who's leading education around header bidding, which partners are implementing header solutions, and how that should kind of be affecting our buy strategies. This is kind of a question for each of you, but who do you think the onus of this education's on, and kind of maintaining transparency, I would say?
Yeah, so from the buy side of things, I think the education has been very minimal. I think heading bidding has been very publisher siloed right now. And being in Minneapolis is a very heavy ad agency market, and talking to fellow old coworkers and so forth, they're not familiar with this area. From having some publisher experience, I do have transparency into that side, so I feel as a buyer I do understand that. But I really think, obviously today we're here talking about this is step one. But really on the buy side, there's not a lot of education, and I think, and we'll get into this too in a little bit, but I really think it will have to come from the DSPs once they start adopting some kind of new ad technologies or new strategies. I think it's really going to be up to the DSPs to communicate and educate, because they're the ones directly working with the marketers and agencies. So I think that's where we are going to have to educate on the buy side, because it's just been so siloed on the publishers, and I think the SSPs and so forth like that have been really working with the publishers. But the last year and a half, while it's been very publisher focused, and I think we are going to start seeing a shift in 2016 for the buy side.
I think on the publisher side, we don't have that much of a lead in terms of education. It started off like 2 years ago with just an informal group of heads of programmatic, and we were just speaking informally. It wasn't until this year that some organizations publisher organizations have formally rolled out meetings between all publishers so that we can learn from each other about what is header bidding and what are the best practices. So we don't have that much of a lead. It's still very informal right now.
Does anyone like the term header bidding? We got to come up with something better, don't we?
Yeah.
Tried to explain it to my wife yesterday preparing for the panel, and she said, header bid? What's header bidding? I think you guys made the right points. I think that naturally the platforms that created header bidding over the past couple of years have been the ones leading the education and adoption. It's been kind of refreshing over the past few months to see publishers kind of catch up and help us understand the way that their page operates and the best way to integrate our technology. And I think I think Ashley's right. I think now we got to educate the marketers, the DSPs. And maybe the first step is just sending a signal to the DSPs and letting them know that, hey, this impression came from a header bidding integration, and it means you can do different things, more cool things.
And to kind of piggyback off of what OpenX is doing is, I don't know, it's been about a month now since the whole announcement about real-time guarantee. So I'm really excited about the real-time guarantee, and that's going to really benefit marketers and advertisers and agencies. It's this, sweet spot between the PMP and the real-time bidding. So with that, I know there's still a lot of integrations and, a lot of movement to go towards that. But I really think the industry on the marketer side is really going to move towards these new technologies like real-time guarantees. So we're going to see kind of this evolution of this. And that's when the DSPs are going to start taking notion is, okay, what is this real-time guarantee? How do we build that into our system and so forth? So that's where then it's going to push the advertiser and the marketer side on this head and bidding. Because in order for a real-time guarantee to work, the publisher must have the head of bidding in the header. So I'm really excited, and I want to pick your brain further after this panel about that.
Andrew, would it be worth explaining real-time guaranteed? Is now the right time? Or?
I think so. We're kind of opening the can of worms, but we can get back off it if we need to. But I'll give you a minute to digress.
I'll try to keep it simple. So it's just the ability to overlap a marketer and advertiser's audience with the publisher's audience, so that the two can understand that overlap and can agree on a guarantee in a programmatic environment. So, I don't know if anybody's had the experience with a PMP deal where you set it up and it looks great on paper, but then it comes time to execute and the impressions end up trickling through. I think part of that's an issue with scale, and header bidding can just amplify volume tremendously. So was that a decent explanation?
Yeah, I think that was good. And I mean, actually, this might be a natural segue because I wanted to ask you all about PMPs. And basically how header bidding is disrupting that space, if it is disrupting that space. Felix, from your direct publisher side, I mean, has anything changed in terms of your priorities, when it comes to setting up PMPs or just trying to kind of advocate for header bidding?
I think header bidding is still very new and adoption is still very low. PMPs have been a very important source of revenue for us, and I think we have more and more advertisers who didn't do any PMPs nor header bidding coming into the market, and the first thing they ask for is, can we do a PMP? Because that's what's familiar. So we see tremendous growth there. But with that said, more and more of my team have to gain not only the knowledge of how PMPs work, but how header bidding works. And now there's header bidding guarantee and how that works.
I think it's really going to affect the way we I'm just seeing the knowledge gap basically amongst buyers, and I'm wondering how it's going to change as we fill it. And actually going back to the whole education onus question, I actually, personally, I think that it might be nice to get some of it from the publishers, at least from a standpoint of, we have a solution in place, you should be thinking about that when you bring your bids to us and when you think about us. Because really, it's only going to benefit the publishers. We're gonna increase our bids. Because we know that we have that opportunity there. So, not to say start talking to us, but I think it would help. We are hearing. I'm personally hearing things from SSPs as well. But maybe it's just a good conversation moment around education.
Sure, I'll hit you up next week.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So going back to the buy side and really the day-to-day stuff, Ashley, I want to get your thoughts on what are you doing to stay ahead? And has header bidding already affected your day-to-day operations? I mean, are you is it right down to your bid strategy? How are you looking at things?
I think still we're in that early adoption. So obviously a concern of mine is, CPM inflation. But what the good news is, if that does, is the case, and I don't think it's going to be a light switch overnight. I think it would be, a gradual type thing as more publishers start adopting to the strategy. With the that potential increase, but however, unlike before, where it was the third or fourth look, now I'm getting first look at it, and obviously that's important for click-through rates and performance and so forth. So obviously it could maybe even out. With that education, what to do about staying ahead to kind of follow up on that is, You can ask my CEO, Andrew, over there. There's nothing more that gives me joy than going to a website, viewing the source code, and inspecting elements on, as to try to figure out a publisher's strategy. I love doing that. I love, poking around on sites and trying to figure out what they're doing. So that helps me on the buy side and so forth on, okay, is this site using headed bidding if I am going to cherry pick and so forth like that. So anyone on my team, I'm always, looking, teaching them about, what the publishers are doing. So as a buyer, you need to know what the publishers are doing, what their strategies are. Are they no longer chasing waterfalls, or are they, going the...
Nice.
Or are they, going to the headed bidding strategy, so like that. So, my biggest thing is just really having that 360 view of understanding, both the buy side and the publisher side, to best fit. But I think we're still at that early phase right now. But next year, sitting at this time, I'll have a different answer for you.
Can I ask you a quick question? You mentioned CPM inflation. What do you mean by that?
Instead of, sorry, I should maybe use my phone, not my phone, microphone. With, not winning the bids, at the CPMs I was winning at, having it being increased because now I'm going to be competing against direct sold and so forth like that. So that's definitely a concern because I know publishers, I guess, Felix, maybe you can answer this question, what, if you can answer it, but what kind of, increase did you see from going from the waterfall solution to the headed bidding? Was it, 10, 30% and so forth?
Yeah, so I think there's some misinformation, and I want to clarify. What we're doing right now is not inflating the price that the impressions that you're getting. What's happening is that we're opening the door to the impressions that you never would have access to before, because traditionally SSPs in our ad server has been at priority 7. So anything from 1 to 6, you will never see, you will never bid on, so you would never gotten those impressions. What we're saying to you now actually is that now you have a shot at 1 to 6. Potentially those impressions are a higher price, but you have the option, not the obligation, to buy those impressions. And if they don't work for you at those CPMs, you are more than welcome to continue buying through us through the SSP at priority 7.
Sorry. I'm not. Yeah, and I think that's a great point about header bidding in general from the buyer side, is we can go about things that, keep the status quo all we want. It's really just opening a new door of opportunity to us. And Tim, did you want to add?
I'm not sure if Ashley bought that, but I agree with Felix. I think it's not inflation as much as it is finding better buyers for each impression, or buyers who value that impression higher. So with the SSP game, you put a tag in the ad server, the SSP pays an average price, and that's where the inventory is allocated. Header bidding lets buyers bid their true value on an impression-by-impression basis. So I hope that the increases in revenue for publishers are coming more from that better allocation of inventory to buyers and not just making buyers pay a higher price.
Yeah, it's better allocation.
Do you buy that?
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to call it CPM inflation, but I just wonder if as the education gap gets filled and more advertisers might want to take advantage of these opportunities, if we're just naturally going to see CPMs go up. I mean, hopefully it's great for everybody because we're just hopefully getting closer to what it's actually worth. Everybody's getting the value they really want out of it. So, with an eye kind of towards the future and next year, Ashley, I know you've already kind of brought up real-time guarantee, but I mean, what do we really think the landscape's going to look like, I guess, if we sat here in a year? Do we think, I'm curious, because, looking back in articles and kind of reading literature, publishers, this is old news. I mean, this has been a discussion that's been had since, years. And here we are just kind of introducing it for buyers in a lot of ways. What do we see in a year of buyer education? What do we think what do we think are going to be the themes going forward?
Yeah, I mean, really, I think it's just the adoption of it, the education, really the DSPs. I know I mentioned that earlier, is how are they going to work with this? And, I would like to continue to see, okay, what publishers are moving forward. And I think, maybe I'm speaking on the publisher end, but I think there's going to be technology companies on both ends of it. So, sorry for OpenX, but I know that you just released, a couple of weeks ago about Meta. Helping, putting all the load of, I know with the heading bidding, it can impact site load times. And I know OpenX came out with a product to take all that load and put onto their servers. So I think, in the future, it's okay, so there's going to be more ad tech related companies on the publisher end to help with, the serving. And then again, on the marketer side, companies assisting advertisers in this space. So that's where I see my prediction is just really kind of ad tech forming around this.
I've got two things. That was a good answer. Two things. First one is, I think we're going to talk more about programmatic as a delivery method and less as a sales channel. So getting more and more comfortable with just, this is how you execute campaigns, whether it be direct or open auction delivery method. And then the second thing would be, getting back to real-time guaranteed, being able to offer guarantees to publishers in a programmatic environment. So where the marketer, the advertiser has choice, but still can offer the publisher a guarantee so that it allows for more creative, more interesting deals.
I think in the coming year, we would definitely love to bring our buyers up to speed on the technology and how we can work together in header bidding. When I mentioned before, 2 or 3 years ago, the first movers in header bidding, they have a proprietary system that buyers didn't have access to. And thankfully, companies like OpenX has made that technology available for both sides so that we can actually have a conversation and say, Andrew, if you want to buy our inventory through header bidding, again, a option for you, you can do it through these technology vendors.
That's all very, very insightful. One thing I'm thinking about in the future is, there's been a couple articles written about the future of the second price auction and kind of how header bidding is affecting that. Obviously, with bids coming in from different directions and not seeing each other and there not being total transparency, there might be some opportunities here for kind of first price auction to really lead the way. Felix, you and I even talked about this a little bit yesterday. What do you guys think about, is header bidding really the end, the death knell for second price auctions? I think that's been, I've seen that. I've seen another nail in the coffin of second price bidding. Do you guys believe the hype, and do you think it's coming?
Sure. I think there is a limitation to the number of headers on a publisher's page. You can't integrate unlimited number of headers. And the way that the best way to do it is integrate someone like an aggregator, like someone like OpenX, and within their systems, there's still an option to do second price auctions, right? So the winning bid from OpenX could be a second price winning price from an advertiser. So I don't think it's necessarily the end of second price, but now we have the option for publishers and advertisers to do first price, which I think is a more transparent and direct way of doing business, which again, going back to the theme of this conference, I think that's a better way of moving forward between advertisers and publishers.
I agree with that. I think that first prices maybe gets away from some of the gamesmanship of the auction mechanics. So DSPs believing that they can get the impression for a lower price if they don't bid the true value. So shading their bid, let's say. And maybe exchanges trying to do things to create more floor price support so that marketers end up paying more. Well, why don't we just all bid the true value and let's make it easier on all of us, and let's have to do less of that guessing or gamesmanship, potentially.
Do you think that will be the case, though? Everyone trying to be true?
No, absolutely not. I think it sounds great, but I'm sure there are issues with first price auctions as well.
Yeah, something I think about, and Felix, we talked about this a little bit, is just the dynamic. As a buyer and as a bidder, as a trader, I think of second price and the flexibility I get with bid modifications and just the ability to kind of turn the levers up on the certain audiences I want. So I think moving to a first price sounds a little bit scary to me. Obviously I have a background in search as well, so anything that kind of questions the second price structure scares me. But I think after thinking about it a lot more, it really is just transparency into value. It's been kind of a theme of what we've talked about along the way here. Header bidding is really just kind of moving towards that transparency between everybody. I did want to touch on one thing, because Felix, you talked about aggregating the header bidder options, and do you guys see a future standard, or do you see anybody really kind of taking the lead in being the solution for everybody?
I don't. I think the field is wide open right now, and there are a lot of competitive vendors. I love to see a standard some way, but I also enjoy just figuring out what everybody's doing correctly to find that right solution as an industry.
Yeah, but there's still that arbitrage opportunity. If we don't have a standard, if not everybody's in the same, I feel like we're almost getting there. Like the promise of header bidders, we kind of need everybody in the same spot to pay it off. So.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but my thinking was your question was revolving around, do we have one standard header technology, one standard way of buying impressions? And I think we don't right now because each vendor is coming out with something that's proprietary to themselves. And I don't think there is right now a kind of urge to get to that one right solution because everything seems really good. To OpenX, they came out with something that's very interesting, which is take the load off your pages and put it into the server-to-server integration. These are the innovations that really help us find the best solution eventually. So I'm not ready for that final answer. I want to go through that process.
All right.
Well, I even think the waterfall, there was no certain strategy. Everyone had their own. So I don't think, with the heading bidding, there is going to probably be a standard because there wasn't even a standard with the waterfall. So I think it's just everyone's probably going to maybe do their own thing.
Yeah, I wonder as well. I think buyers and publishers or sellers want choice. The whole move to get away from the company that rhymes with Moogle. I think we all want options, and if there's just one, I mean, I'd love for there to be one OpenX header bidding partner, but I'm not sure if it's realistic, at least short term.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Steve, do you want to open up for Q&A? Or?
Yes. Hi, Michael Prasad, Cargo. My question is, do you guys think that header bidding is a long-term solution, or do you think it's something that's going to change over time? I feel like given that header bidding is something that's used to sort of go around enhanced dynamic allocation, I'm curious on if Google made that switch and maybe header bidding isn't needed anymore. I'm curious if you think this is going to be something long-term or something that's going to continue to change over time.
It feels to me like the future of advertising, honestly. It's moving closer and closer toward a unified auction where all demand can compete simultaneously for each impression, bidding the true value. And when you say getting away from enhanced dynamic allocation, I'm not exactly sure what that means, but when we submit a bid into DFP, AdX is still there bidding alongside of us. So it's not that we're trying to circumvent completely.
They need to have a header bidding solution if AdX allowed you to update a line item. The reason that you guys go into the header and pass the key values so you can compete with AdX, where in other instances you could not because you can't update the line item. That's the whole reason header bidding was created. So curious if Google made that switch, I mean, what would be the use for header bidding, or if you think that Google will stay sort of rigid and header bidding needs to be that solution that allows you to tap into that supply in that way?
It's a good question. I think as long as publishers want choice, we're going to end up with more exchanges and companies than just Google and AdX. But.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Google already responded. They have a first look product out there. So I think there is a lot of room for growth for header bidding because I think your vision of having enhanced dynamic allocation being a competitive product is still like a ways off. But I think anything could happen, and potentially something that rhymes with Moogle could come out with something that's even better. But right now I really feel that header bidding has a lot of room for growth.
I think from a basic perspective, I mean, the jack's out of the box with the publishers. They're seeing the lifts they're seeing. I don't think we can simply go back to the way things were if Google changed their products. So, and as Felix mentioned, they responded. They're entering the conversation.
Is there anything, to knit this conversation back to the previous conversation, is there any danger or any safeguards in place to make sure that header bidding, since it is opening up, as Felix, you described it, opening up higher priority inventory to everyone, is there a danger of sort of lower quality inventory that often is associated with programmatic and older processes working its way up into what would normally be higher profile placements?
I think when we look at the old world where we had the SSP relationships, I want to say that not all inventory that goes into our SSP is bad inventory. I think there is still a lot of valuable inventory, particularly when you look at buying by audiences, because we see transacted prices that are way above what we would consider a remnant price. So I don't know if there is a necessary danger of saying like the impressions that get transacted at 20 cents now becomes a $20 impression. I don't think that will ever happen, especially with a lot of the safeguards like viewability, audiences, double checking to make sure that the buyer is not bidding $20 for a 10-cent impression.
I think that's right. I think just focusing on the quality and the controls of the platforms you work with is important, and the tools that Nicole mentioned earlier. Also, I think we all have the power to fight the low-quality ads and the bad stuff. We just got to better enact on it.
Maybe I'm an idealist, but going back to the theme we had about, this is getting closer to true value. I don't know. I mean, if the cream rises to the top and this is the top quality inventory, the prices are going to be at the top, then I mean, they should be premium advertisers there and brands that are paying for that. So I would hope that would kind of solve the problem before it starts.
Over here.
Hi, Andrew Eklund with Cicerone, and it's true, Ashley does sit and look at code during the day. It's the weirdest thing ever. I think this is a question maybe for you, Felix, but marketers and advertisers sort of come from two different camps. The digital marketer thinks about conversion and cost per lead and really down low funnel activity. Advertisers have typically been above that to fuel that funnel. And they oftentimes are working in different departments. So what we're seeing at our clients are people trying to unify around this, right? So that, I have insurance clients that will pay $30 to Google for a click for auto insurance, right? There are a lot of publishers who would love that sort of CPM, right? And so are we seeing this, and by the way, sorry Ashley, I'm all about CPM inflation because I think publishers should get paid for bringing quality audience. At the same time, I love an auction-based system that AdWords sort of started 16 years ago, right, of sort of making that a market system. Does header bidder, is that sort of what we've all been looking for? So is it a fairer system than what we've had previously, so we're not paying pennies on a dollar? And believe me, I understand being an advocate for advertisers too, try and get the best deal out there. But is header bidder possibly sort of the Switzerland in all this, the demilitarized zone for what's happening in programmatic?
Andrew, that's a really good question, and thank you for that. I think when you look at the publisher's inventory, there will always be a section of inventory that we don't want to go through an auction system, right? There needs to be some kind of guarantee, especially at premium publishers. And so the argument to make for header bidder to allow it to get access to this most premium layer of inventory has to involve getting some kind of guarantee from the advertiser. I can't go to our CRO and say, hey, listen, we're going to open the top layer of our inventory, and today you might get 2% fill, and tomorrow you might get 100% fill. So I think there's going to be some value exchange, right, where you're going to have to give me some assurances that you're going to buy that inventory and forego the option of doing an auction, but at the same time, you get access to this better inventory. Now, if you do want to have the option to do an auction, that's always available because I'm not going to get rid of the SSP relationship, and you can continue doing that as long as you want. I strongly hate that word of CPM inflation, so I hope we can get rid of that by the end of this conversation.
We are going to wrap. We're going to extend this into one of the roundtables. We're going to have we'll continue this in our roundtable on header bidding in about an hour. Right now, though, we're going to take a coffee break, and before we do, a couple of activity announcements. For those of you who didn't catch it earlier, unfortunately, the balloon is in Oz and not here, and because of what are windy conditions for a balloon, at least, way up there, that's been canceled, but there are still spots for horseback riding and also hiking and golf. Golf, in fact, we've got we have another course that you can join. So if you're interested in any of those alternate activities during coffee break, go and see everybody at the front desk. We need to have the sign-ups within the next 15 minutes. So we're going to take coffee for about 10 minutes and come back and talk local and audience-powered DSPs.
Thank you.